So we have two outlines, the front view and the top view. The front view is about 7 squares and the top view is about 6 squares. You can assume that your view, even if it's smaller, that it's 7 squares for the front view and 6 squares for the top view. So what we need to do is we need to center it on this sheet properly. We want them from side to side centered, and we want it vertically centered so the 3 open spots are equal. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold the front view in half, and we're going to mark the center point. We're going to use that mark to center it in a minute. Next, we're going to count across the paper. Now this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and each square equals a 1/4 inch. So it's 11 across, and 11 times 4 is 44 squares. So halfway would be 22 squares. So count 22 squares over and mark the center point. Take your front view and your top view, and they equal 13 squares. Now vertically you have 8.5 inches, which is 34 squares. If we take the 13 squares that your front and top view add up to, and we subtract that from 34, we'll get 21 squares in total. 21 squares divided by these 3 spaces equals 7. 7 squares between each view. So what we're going to do is we're going to lay it out so it's 7, 7, 7, 6, 7. Let's count up 7 squares. That's the bottom of your front view. Then the 7 for your front view. So you count 7 again. Then there's going to be 7 between the front view and the top view. And then this is only 6. So we count 6 for your top view. And what remains should be 7. So I'm going to repeat this. It's 7, 7, 7, 6, 7. We want to line up the center of the page with the center on our drawing. So that center mark we want to line right up there. We need to draw the outline of the shape. Anywhere we have straight surfaces, we just write the first point and the last point. Anywhere we have curved surfaces, we draw a tiny point at each grid line. These points that you're going to write onto the grid line are going to be used later to connect the dots with a French curve. Here again we have curves, so we're going to put a dot at each grid line. Every time it passes a grid line, we put a tiny little dot. So with a straight edge, you can draw from one point to another for any straight lines. Now all that I have left are the curved lines, so I'm going to use a French curve to connect the dots. Now French curves have lots of different curves on them. French curves have infinite amount of curves on them. So what we can do is we can rotate the French curve around until we find that the dots line up and we can connect the dots. Your goal is to get a curve that looks continuous. If you make a mistake, go ahead and erase it. Normally you can find the curves you need on the French curve if you look. Now when you look at that curve, it looks like one continuous curve that was drawn with one tool. But what we had to do is draw 3 curves to make that one curve. Use this French curve on the back again. Notice every line in the front view was drawn with either a straight edge or a French curve, but you can also use circle templates. And there we have our front view. Now take the rear of the car straight up and the front edge of the car straight up, and that should be the front and the back of your top view. If your cutout is different than the length of those 2 lines, you're going to want to fix your cutout. Also, my car is exactly 6 squares wide, but if your car is less than 6, you're going to want to make sure you center it between these 2 lines. And make sure that your top view is between the front line and the back line. I start with the straight lines. And then I draw the dots for the curved lines. So now we're going to get out our straight edge and we're going to connect the dots to make our straight lines. And then we're going to use a circle template to draw this front edge, which is circular. Next, I'm going to use a French curve to finish up that curve in the middle of the top view. Okay. Then I want you to erase any lines that don't belong on your views. Any stray marks, go ahead and erase those now. This will be the easiest time to get rid of these. Any marks that you use to locate the placement of your views, go ahead and erase those. And that is our outlines. Next, we're going to work on wheels. Front to back, it doesn't really matter where you place your wheels. It really depends on your own drawing. But vertically in your front view, you need to put your wheels a half square into your car. A half square into your car. That's going to be where the axles are for your view. Next, we're going to use a straight edge to draw center marks. Center marks are long, short, long. We're going to draw those vertically and horizontally with a short line in the middle with two long lines coming off of it. I'm going to be drawing a rubber wheel, so I'm going to use the 1 1/8 inch circle template. You may see that there are black marks at each quadrant of the circle, top, left, right, and bottom. You want to line those marks up with the center marks for the drawing. Once it's aligned up, you can draw the circle, and that circle will have the center point right at the crosshair of the center mark. I'm going to proceed to draw center marks for the rear wheel. Notice I draw the short line in the middle and two long lines off of it, both for vertical and horizontal. Again, I use the 1 1/8 inch circle because I'm drawing rubber wheels. Line it up with the tick marks on the circle template to the center marks on the drawing, and I draw my circle. For the top view, we're going to use the circle at the bottom. We're going to transfer those lines straight up. So the first thing is the center mark. We want to draw a line all the way through the car. This can be drawn lightly because some of it's going to be erased. We also want to bring up the front of the wheel, and we're only going to draw small marks on each side of the car for that. And the rear wheel, we're going to draw small marks on each side of the car for that, for the rear of the wheel. Now, to place the wheel, we want to move out 2 squares and then come back in a square and a half. So outside edge from the car is 2 squares away from the car, and then we go in a square and a half to the inside edge of the wheel. So there's going to be a small space between the wheel and your car so that the wheel doesn't rub against your car. You can see on this car there's a space between the wheel and the car, and this is intentional to keep it from rubbing on the car. So now we're going to take a circle template with the biggest circle, which is 2 1/4 inch, and we're going to line up the tick mark on the top and the tick mark on the bottom to the center mark for the front view and the axle in the top view. Then we're going to move it up and down until the top edge of the circle template is touching that mark that you put right on the inside of the wheel. We're going to draw this line from the rear of the wheel to the front of the wheel. We're going to get it all straightened out, and we're going to draw that across. Then we move the circle template up so it lines up in the same way and lines up with the outside edge of the wheel. We're going to draw from the back of the wheel across to the front of the wheel. Now you may notice that there are flat spots on the wheel. We're going to go ahead and draw those as flat spots. Those are part of the design of the wheel. Erase any stray marks. For this is going to be the best time to do so. Now if you look at an actual wheel, you'll actually see that the wheels they're kind of rounded at this point. We're going to draw that as just a straight line just to make it simpler. Now we have 4 wheels that we need to draw. So we're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the top rear wheel. Mark the inside and outside marks. You start by going 2 squares out and then come back in 1.5 squares. We draw the top line and the bottom line, lining it up the same way we did for the first wheel. Then we bring the center for the axle. We bring the frontmost portion of the wheel up on each side of the car. And the rearmost portion of the wheel on each side of the car. We want to mark 2 squares out and then come back in 1.5 squares. That's the width of the rubber wheel. We're going to start from the back line to the front line. Again, from the back line to the front line. You should have flat spaces between those 2 curves. We're going to mark 2 squares out. We're going to draw that curve from the back line to the front line. We're going to go 1.5 squares back, and we're going to draw from the back line to the front line. And so now all we have to do is erase our stray marks, and we have the top view of our wheels. Now if you're doing other types of wheels, for instance the plastic wheels, you need to look at the dimension layout sheet to see how those are drawn. Next we're going to talk about hidden lines. There are various hidden lines on this drawing. The first hidden line we're going to deal with is the outline of the car behind the wheel is going to be hidden because that bottom of the car is behind the wheel, so you wouldn't be able to see that. Now hidden lines are dashed lines, and what I like to do is I like to use the grid marks on the paper as indicators of where to draw my dashes. So you notice I put a cross every time I see a grid mark. And that gives me really nice spacing. I'm going to do the same for the rear wheel. And it changes angle here, so I'm going to put this one in too. On top view, you have hidden lines for your axles. Now, where the axles are inside the car or inside the wheel, they're going to be hidden. On the outside of the wheel, they're going to be visible. So I'm drawing the visible lines first. Then I'm going to put the hidden lines inside. Make sure to put your dashes where the grid lines are to give you nice spacing. So inside the wheel, inside the car, you have hidden lines. On the outside of the wheel and outside of the car, you have visible lines. So we're going to do the same thing for the back. We're going to line it up. We're going to draw our visible lines first between the wheels and the car and outside the wheels for a very short amount. And then we're going to draw hidden lines inside the wheels and inside the car. Okay, so we have a couple more hidden lines to work on. There is a hole that goes into the back of the car. That is the CO2 cartridge hole. That will be hidden in both the front view and the top view. Now that needs to go at least half square above your axle. So I'm going to place mine right there, a half square above my axle. And then it needs to go up 3 full squares. A CO2 cartridge is 3/4 of an inch tall, which is 3 squares. So we need to make sure that we have enough space between the top of the car and the CO2 cartridge. The CO2 cartridge also goes 2 inches into the car. So that's going to be the bottom of my CO2 cartridge. I'm going to go up 3 squares. That's the top of my CO2 cartridge. And then I'm going to go in 8 squares to the rear of my CO2 cartridge. That's where it's going to stop when it goes into my car. And I'm going to draw these hidden lines just like I did before, putting dashes where the grid marks are. At the corner, I'm going to draw a half dash. Draw the bottom lines with hidden lines. And again, at the corner, I draw a half dash. And then vertically, that back line, I draw the hidden lines for that. Okay, so that is the size of the CO2 cartridge. Now we need to do the same thing for the top view. In the top view, it must be centered. So count how many squares wide your car is and make sure it's centered. Mine is only 6 wide, so I need to go to the middle, which is 3 up, and then I need to go 1.5 above and 1.5 below that center point. So now I'm going to draw the back of the CO2 cartridge, which is 8 squares back. I'm going to draw with a straight edge my hidden lines for this CO2 cartridge, just like I did in the front view. Remember, it must be centered. The CO2 cartridge is 3/4 of an inch, which means that you need to count up 1.5 squares and down 1.5 squares from the middle. Okay, and we're going to continue drawing the hidden lines across the back. All right, so that is the hidden lines for the CO2 cartridge. The last set of hidden lines are for the small hole that goes in the bottom of your car. This hole is for your stand and also for testing in the wind tunnel. This hole needs to be in a place close to the center of your car, but not so that it goes into your CO2 cartridge hole. So that mark right there is the end of my CO2 cartridge hole. So we're going to put this hole right here, a half square in front of our CO2 cartridge, and we're going to count 2 squares up and 1 square wide, and we're going to draw the hidden lines for the front of the hole and the back of the hole. Now in the top view, what we're going to do is we're going to drag that up and we're going to put a cross where that center would be. We're going to use that to make our center mark so that we can use our circle template. And we're going to use the 1/4 inch circle template, which is right here, and we're going to line that up, and this time we're going to draw this circle as a hidden line. So we're going to draw basically the bottom, top, right, and left side of the circle as hidden lines. So our hidden lines are finished. Center lines indicate the center of circular objects. We've already actually drawn quite a few of these. The center marks for the wheels are center marks, and the center mark for that wind tunnel hole is also a center mark. So we're going to draw 3 more center marks. One is going vertically through the wind tunnel hole. That's finished. Remember, it's long, short, long. And then going horizontally through the CO2 cartridge hole. That is the center of our CO2 cartridge, and we want to make it long, short, long. So start in the center, draw short, and then long in this direction and long in that direction. We're going to do the same thing across the entire top view. So we're going to use the existing center mark to continue across. So we're going to draw another short and then a long. And it goes beyond the edge of the drawing. And then in the front, we're going to do it again. We're going to draw a short and then a long line. And that is a finished grid drawing. Now we need to do our dimensioning.